Welcome to the captivating realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Enjoy the journey.
The council hall loomed ominously as Darius Hale, Earth's foremost diplomat, stood in its center, feeling the immense weight of interstellar politics pressing upon him. Beneath the stiff collar of his formal attire, a bead of sweat ran down his back. For weeks, he had strived to negotiate peace, hoping to prevent a full-scale war between Earth and Theoria, an advanced alien world ruled by Queen Mirth. Yet every proposal he offered was met with stubborn resistance, each compromise flatly rejected. War seemed inevitable. Queen Mirth, the very picture of regal authority, sat at the head of the council, her icy blue eyes fixed upon him with disdain reserved for those she deemed inferior. She had listened to his pleas, countered his arguments, and extended no gestures of goodwill in return. The tension in the room was palpable, and time was slipping away. Enough, Queen Mirth's voice echoed throughout the chamber, cold and resolute. We will reconvene in an hour. Let us see if you can produce anything worthwhile by then, Mr. Hale. Darius clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay composed. An hour, what could he possibly offer in an hour that he hadn't already? He nodded curtly and exited the chamber, stepping into the cool, open air of the palace gardens. Leaning against a stone pillar, he tried to think. Earth's fate rested on him, a single misstep could lead to countless deaths. But no matter his efforts, the Theorians seemed intent on conflict. There had to be a way to turn the tide and show them that peace was worth pursuing. A soft rustling behind him interrupted his thoughts. Turning, he saw Princess Elena approaching with deliberate grace. She was a vision, tall and lithe, her blue-skinned form draped in a flowing silver gown that clung to her like liquid. Her vibrant red hair cascaded over her shoulders, a striking contrast to her pale complexion. But it was her eyes that captivated him, intense, almost predatory, with a hint of something dangerous. Darius straightened, uncertain of her intentions as she closed the distance. Elena had been present at the negotiations. Mostly silent and observant, letting her mother lead. Now, here she was, standing before him, her gaze unsettling. Most humans tremble before the Aryan authority, she said, her voice soft and smoky. But you hold your ground. Darius raised an eyebrow, cautious of her sudden attention. I represent Earth's interests. Standing firm is part of the job. Elena's lips curled into a slow, predatory smile as she took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. I admire that. We value strength on Theoria, but strength comes in many forms. As she drew closer, he could feel the heat radiating from her. Her presence was almost overwhelming, and when she gently placed a hand on his chest, he could feel his pulse quicken. There's a way to end this, she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. Darius stiffened, his heartbeat accelerating. What do you mean? Elena leaned closer, her lips barely grazing his ear. If you truly want peace, you'll share my bed tonight. The bluntness of her demand hit him like a shock. What? He managed, disbelief thick in his tone. You heard me, she replied, her tone both teasing and deadly serious. Come to my chambers at 2 a.m, or the negotiations will fail, and my mother will have no choice but to declare war. Darius's mind raced. This had to be a trick, a test of his resolve. He searched her face for any hint of deception, but found only calm, dangerous confidence. You're saying the fate of 2 worlds rests on that? He asked incredulously. Elena's smile widened, and she took another step closer, her body brushing against his. Precisely. This isn't about politics, human. It's about power. Show me that you understand control and desire, or you'll never sway us. She pressed her hand firmly against his chest, her fingers curling into his uniform as if testing his resolve. Darius stood frozen, his mind a whirl of conflicting thoughts. What was she playing at? Was this some strange Therian custom, or simply a power play by a princess accustomed to having her way? Before he could respond, she turned, her hips swaying as she walked away. I'll see you tonight, she called over her shoulder. Or Earth's blood will be on your hands. Darius watched her disappear, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just a diplomatic test, it was far more perilous. What choice did he have? To refuse risked provoking the very war he'd fought to prevent. To accept meant entering her game. As dusk settled over the alien city, Darius paced his quarters, replaying the day's events in his mind. Could this demand truly be Earth's only hope for peace? His diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for a scenario like this, where seduction and manipulation held the lives of billions in the balance. He checked the time. Midnight. 2 hours left. Standing by the window, he stared out over Theoria's sprawling capital. Somewhere out there, Elena waited. The memory of her closeness, her provocative words, haunted him. This wasn't about passion, it couldn't be. There had to be a deeper purpose to her request, but before he could let the doubt settle, the door to his quarters opened without warning. Darius turned, his heart pounding, half expecting a guard or emissary. Instead, it was Princess Elena, standing in the doorway with that same, predatory glint in her eyes. "I see you're still thinking," she said, stepping into the room, her movements fluid, almost feline. Her silver gown shimmered in the dim light, hugging every contour as she approached. "It's flattering that you're taking this so seriously," Darius steadied himself. "You can't be serious about this," he said, trying to assert control. "This is dangerous, Elena," her lips curled into a sly smile as she approached, her fingers trailing across his desk. "Oh, I'm very serious," she purred, locking her gaze with his. "My mother may rule, but I hold more power than you think. If you want to avoid war, you'll do what's necessary, and this. This is necessary," he asked, struggling to keep his frustration in check. Elena stepped even closer, mere inches away. Her hand rested on his chest, fingers splayed across his heart. "Yes. Diplomat. Sometimes unconventional methods are needed." Darius stared down at her, torn between duty and her strange allure. Her presence made it difficult to think clearly. But he couldn't let himself be seduced into a grave error, not when so much was at stake. "I don't believe you," he replied, his voice firm. "You want me to accept that this is the only way for peace?" Elena's expression softened briefly, and she leaned even closer, her warmth against his. "You don't have to believe me," she whispered. "But if you want to save Earth, you'll come to my chambers tonight." Her hand slid down his chest before she turned and headed for the door. "You have until 2, she said. Her voice a dangerous promise. "Don't be late," and with that, she was gone, leaving Darius alone in his dimly lit room, his heart racing. He sank onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. This was madness. But what if refusing her meant losing Earth's last chance at peace? Glancing at the clock, he saw the minutes ticking down. 1 hour left. He resumed pacing. He couldn't let her win, but could he risk turning her down if it meant war? The Queen had already made her stance clear. Elena was his last hope. At 1:45, Darius made his decision. The cost of war, lives lost, destruction, was too great to bear. He would go to her. He had to. As the minutes passed, he left his quarters, navigating the palace's winding corridors. His heart pounded with each step, the weight of his choice pressing on him. He passed guards, servants, diplomats from other worlds, but none took notice. He asked, his voice low and tense. Elena stepped closer, her fingers lightly grazing his arm as she moved around him, her gaze fixed on his with an intensity that quickened his heartbeat. "What I want," she murmured, "is to find out if you're strong enough to handle me and if you're ready to do whatever it takes to protect your people." Her hand glided down his chest, fingers curling into his shirt as she leaned in closer, her lips brushing against his ear. "Prove it to me, Darius. Show me what you're capable of." Without waiting for an answer, she kissed him, her lips fierce and demanding against his. The heat between them flared instantly, all the tension from their previous encounters erupting to the surface. Darius hesitated for just a moment before surrendering, his hands finding her waist and drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, transforming into something more than a simple meeting of lips. It became a clash of power, of dominance and submission, as they both surrendered to the intensity of the moment. As they struggled for control, Elena's robe slipped from her shoulders, pooling on the floor and revealing her bare skin in the dim light. Darius's hands explored her body, tracing every curve and inch of her smooth blue skin. As their kiss grew increasingly heated and intense. Yet, even as passion overtook him, a part of Darius remained alert, aware of the perilous game he was playing. This wasn't merely about lust or desire, it was about power, and Elena was testing him to see if he would falter under the weight of her demands. He wouldn't. As they tumbled onto the bed, the burdens of their two worlds briefly lifted, leaving only the raw intensity of their connection. But Darius understood that this night wouldn't culminate in simple satisfaction, the real battle was still to come, and he had to be prepared. For come morning, as the sun rose over Theoria, the fate of Earth would still hang in the balance. When the first rays of Theoria's twin suns broke through the curtains, Darius awoke to find Princess Elena draped over him, her smooth blue skin faintly glowing in the morning light. Her head rested on his chest, her fiery red hair cascading over his body like flames. For a fleeting moment, everything felt strangely serene. The events of the night seemed dreamlike, an improbable union between a human diplomat and the Thorian princess who held the fate of two worlds in her hands. But reality crashed back down the instant his eyes opened. The passion of the night, once intense and overwhelming, was now a distant memory, replaced by the cold weight of responsibility. He had come not as a lover, but as a negotiator, and with the dawn came the consequences of his choices, looming larger than ever. Elena stirred beside him, her eyes slowly fluttering open. When their gazes met, her lips curled into a satisfied smile, yet behind that satisfaction, Darius sensed something else, conflict. "Good morning, human," she whispered, her voice soft yet edged with mischief. "I see you stayed." Darius forced a smile, brushing a lock of her hair behind her ear. "It wasn't exactly an easy choice," he replied quietly, "but I had no option, did I?" Elena's smile faded slightly, her expression turning thoughtful. She propped herself on her elbow, looking down at him with her piercing blue eyes. "No, you didn't," she said softly, "but you handled it well." A silence fell between them, thick with unspoken tension. Darius couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. That Elena had more on her mind than just a night of passion. "What now?" he asked, sitting up slowly to avoid disturbing her. "Last night you made it sound like everything depended on this, but I can't believe that was all there was." Elena sat up as well, wrapping the sheet around herself as she scrutinized him. "You're right," she admitted, her tone suddenly serious. "Last night was a test. I needed to see if you were willing to do what was necessary, no matter the cost, to determine if you had the strength to match us." Darius narrowed his eyes, suspicion creeping in. "And what did you decide? Did I pass your test?" Elena's gaze softened, but a dangerous glint remained in her eyes. "You did. You showed me you're not like the others. Your kind usually breaks under pressure, but you didn't, you stood firm." Darius frowned. "So what happens now? Will you convince your mother to avoid war?" Elena's expression faltered for a brief moment as she looked away, biting her lower lip. "It's not that simple," she said softly, her voice laced with hesitation. "My mother won't be easily swayed, but I have influence. After last night, I can advocate for peace, but it won't be sufficient on its own." A cold knot formed in Darius's stomach. He had known all along that this was more than mere seduction. "What do you mean? What more do you want from me?" Elena turned to face him. Her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "The Queen isn't just preparing for war out of pride, there's a secret she's been hiding from everyone. Theoria has been developing something, a weapon unlike anything the galaxy has seen. She intends to use it, Darius. If we go to war, Earth won't stand a chance." Darius's heart raced. "A weapon? What kind of weapon?" Elena hesitated, her expression darkening. "It's called the Scythe of Zoran. It's a doomsday device, ancient technology my people recovered from a long-forgotten world. The power it holds is unimaginable. If she activates it, Earth won't just lose the war, it'll be erased from existence. Darius's blood ran cold. This was far worse than he had anticipated. You knew about this all along. Elena nodded slowly. I didn't know how far she was willing to go until recently. Now she's obsessed with using it to make an example of Earth. Darius stood up, pacing the room, his mind racing. And you didn't think to tell me this before? I didn't have a choice, Elena snapped, her voice rising. If I had told you sooner, you would have refused. You would have tried to fight her, and she would have crushed you. I needed to know you were willing to do whatever it took to stop this. Now that I know, we can stop her together. Darius turned to her, anger flaring. You manipulated me, Elena. You used me. Elena stood, her expression hardening. And you would have done the same if you were in my position. Don't pretend this is all on me, Darius. You chose to come here. You chose to stay. Now we have to finish this, or everything we did will have been for nothing. The room fell into a tense silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on both of them. Darius knew she was right, but the betrayal still stung. He had been played, manipulated into a corner. But it didn't change the fact that the stakes were too high to walk away now. What's the plan? He asked, his voice tight. Elena took a deep breath, stepping closer to him. We need to reach the scythe before my mother can activate it. It's hidden deep within the royal vaults beneath the palace. Only I know the access codes. If we can disable it, we can force her to negotiate seriously. Darius nodded, shifting into action mode. And how do we get there without her knowing? Elena's lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. Leave that to me. I have ways to slip past the guards unnoticed, but we need to act quickly. She won't wait long to make her move. Without another word, Elena began dressing swiftly and deliberately. Darius followed suit, his mind racing with the enormity of their impending task. This was no longer about diplomacy or seduction, it was about survival. If they failed, Earth, and perhaps even Theoria, would be lost. Once they were both ready, Elena led him to a hidden passage behind a tapestry in her chambers, one that wound through the ancient stone walls of the palace. As they navigated the narrow corridors, the tension between them remained thick, but an unspoken understanding now connected them. Whatever had transpired between them the night before, they were in this together. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a dimly lit chamber deep beneath the palace, the air cold and musty. At the far end of the room stood an imposing vault door, etched with intricate alien designs that glowed faintly in the darkness. This is it, Elena whispered, approaching the control panel beside the door. Her fingers danced over the holographic display, entering the codes with practiced ease. Darius's heart pounded in his chest as the vault door hissed open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. In the center of the room, suspended in a field of shimmering energy, was the Scythe of Zoran. It was massive, a jagged crystalline structure that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. There it is, Elena said softly, her voice filled with awe and fear. The weapon that could annihilate your world. Darius stepped forward, breathless as he gazed upon the ancient device. This was it, the key to everything. The fate of Earth and Theoria rested on their next actions. But just as they moved toward the device, a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and filled with fury. So this is where you've been hiding, my dear daughter. Darius froze, turning to see Queen Mir standing at the entrance to the vault, her blue eyes aflame with fury. Queen Mira's voice dripped with venom as she hissed, "You thought you could betray me? You thought you could defy your own mother and live?" Elena stepped forward, chin held high, determined. "I won't let you destroy them, mother. I won't allow you to ignite a war that will devastate us all." A cruel smile twisted Mira's lips. "You were always too soft, Elena. But it doesn't matter, I'll deal with you both, and then Earth will learn the consequences of defiance." Darius's heart raced, they were out of time. The final confrontation had begun. He stood frozen, heart pounding in his chest as Queen Mara's piercing blue eyes fixed on him and Elena. The tension in the chamber was palpable, the eerie glow of the scythe of Zoran casting strange shadows on the walls. The ancient weapon hummed ominously in the background, a stark reminder of the devastation it could unleash. "Mother," Elena called out, stepping forward to confront the queen, her voice quavering but resolute. "It doesn't have to come to this. We can find another way. War isn't the solution." Queen Mara sneered, advancing with an imposing figure that cast a long shadow over the vault. "You have always been weak, Elena, clinging to your ideals of peace and cooperation. But you forget your place. You forget what it means to rule." Mara's gaze turned cold and unforgiving as it fell on Darius. "And you," she spat, contempt dripping from her words, "you thought you could manipulate my daughter, seduce her into betraying her own people. You humans are pathetic, driven by your base desires." Darius met her glare with defiance. "This isn't about manipulation or seduction," he said, voice steady. "This is about preventing a war that will destroy both our worlds. You can still choose peace, peace." Queen Mara's laughter was sharp and bitter. "There is no peace without power. The weak are trampled, and Theoria will not be weak. We will show Earth its place, and the galaxy will learn to fear us." Elena clenched her fists protectively in front of Darius. "I won't allow you to use the scythe, Mother. It's too dangerous. We barely comprehend its power. If you unleash it, you could wipe out more than just Earth, you could obliterate entire systems." Queen Mara's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but it was quickly replaced by steely resolve. "That is a risk I am willing to take. Theoria's dominance must be secured, and if Earth must burn to ensure it, so be it." Darius's mind raced, searching for a way out. They had to disable the scythe before Mara activated it. But time was running out. "Elena," he whispered urgently, glancing at the control panel near the scythe. "We need to shut it down now." Elena's face was pale but resolute as she nodded, aware of the gravity of their mission. But Queen Mara caught the exchange and sneered. "You think you can stop me? You think you can take the scythe from me?" She raised her hand, and a sharp crack of energy shot from her fingertips, a blinding bolt of blue light aimed straight at Darius. In an instant, Elena dove in front of him just as the energy blast struck her. She cried out in pain, the force of the blow knocking her to the ground, her body convulsing from the impact. "Elena!" Darius shouted, rushing to her side. He knelt beside her, trembling hands trying to help her sit up. Her breathing was shallow, face contorted in agony. But she remained conscious. Mara's laughter echoed through the chamber as she approached, her expression twisted with triumph. "You see now," she taunted, her voice a venomous whisper, "you are nothing. You never were, and now you'll perish with the rest of your kind." Darius's chest tightened with rage. He stood between Elena and her mother, fists clenched at his sides. "I won't let you do this," he growled, voice low and filled with determination. "And how do you plan to stop me?" Queen Mara sneered, raising her hand again, energy crackling between her fingers. Darius didn't wait for her to strike. He lunged toward the control panel beside the scythe, fingers flying over the holographic interface, desperately searching for a way to shut down the weapon. But the codes were complex, the language unfamiliar, and time was slipping away. Mara's eyes blazed with fury as she realized his intentions. "No!" she screamed, launching another bolt of energy toward him. Darius barely dodged, the bolt grazing his arm and sending searing pain through his body. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give up. He couldn't let Earth be destroyed, he couldn't allow Elena's sacrifice to be in vain. "Elena," he called out, voice strained with pain. "I need the codes." Struggling to her feet, weak from the blast, Elena nodded and stumbled toward him. Leaning against the control panel, her hands shook as she input the final sequence. The room trembled as the scythe's energy field flickered, then dimmed. The weapon's hum grew quieter, its power slowly fading as the shutdown process initiated. Queen Mara screamed in fury, her face twisted with rage as she watched her plans unravel. "You fools! You have no idea what you've done." Before Darius could react, Mara lunged at him, hand raised for a fatal blow. But Elena was faster. With the last of her strength, she grabbed the ceremonial dagger from her belt and thrust it into her mother's side, the blade sinking deep. Mara gasped, eyes wide with shock, staggering back, clutching the wound. Blood poured from the gash, staining her elegant robes as she fell to her knees. "He betrayed me," she whispered, voice weak, disbelief etched on her face. Elena stood over her mother, chest heaving with exhaustion and pain. "I did what had to be done," she said quietly, voice trembling. "For peace, for Theoria, for us." Mara's eyes flickered with one final surge of hatred before they closed for the last time. Her body slumped to the floor, lifeless. Silence enveloped the chamber, the weight of the moment pressing down on Darius and Elena as they stood over the fallen queen. "It's over," Elena whispered, voice barely audible. She sank to her knees beside her mother's body, tears streaming down her face. Darius knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "You did what was right," he said softly, his voice a mixture of sorrow and relief. "You saved us all." Elena looked up, blue eyes brimming with tears. "I had no choice," she whispered, "but it doesn't feel like a victory." Darius pulled her close, holding her as she cried. The weight of their actions settled over them like a dark cloud. Yet amid the sorrow, there was hope. The scythe of Zoran was deactivated, and the war had been averted. Theoria and Earth would have peace, but at a high cost. As the echoes of their battle faded, Darius knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of a new era for both their worlds. They had won this fight. But many challenges lay ahead. Together, they would face them, their bond forged in the crucible of desire, betrayal, and ultimately, sacrifice. For Darius and Elena, there would be no going back. The following days passed in a blur. The death of Queen Mara sent shockwaves through Theoria, the news spreading across the galaxy with unprecedented speed. The people of Theoria were left leaderless, confused, and uncertain about their future. Yet with Queen Mara's death came a fragile hope for peace, a chance for Theoria and Earth to avert the devastation that had seemed inevitable just days before. Elena was crowned the new Queen of Theoria in a solemn private ceremony. There were no grand celebrations or cheering crowds. The weight of her mother's death hung over the palace like a shroud. Elena stood at the center, bearing the responsibility not only of her people but of the entire galaxy. And at her side, as always, was Darius. They had fought together, bled together, and now they ruled together. But as Darius lingered in the shadows of the newly crowned queen's chamber, watching her from a distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Elena sat at her desk, poring over reports and diplomatic communications. Her once fiery, rebellious spirit seemed dimmed, replaced by the heavy burden of leadership. No longer just a princess seeking peace, she was now a queen, and the choices she made would determine the future of her people, and his. "How does it feel?" Darius asked quietly, stepping forward. Elena glanced up, her expression weary. "Like a weight has been placed on my shoulders that I can't lift," she admitted. "I never wanted this. I wanted to change Theoria, not rule it, but you have a chance to make a real difference now," Darius encouraged gently. "You can reshape the future, not just for Theoria but for Earth too. You can show them a new path, a way to coexist." She sighed, fingers brushing over the holographic images of the galaxy spread before her. "I hope so. I need to. But how do I convince them? After everything that's happened, how can I gain their trust?" "You'll have to start by reaching out," Darius suggested. Heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and excitement. "Invite Earth's leaders to Theoria. Show them the new path you envision. You can build alliances, mend wounds. She looked at him, doubt flickering in her eyes. What if they don't come? What if they see me as just my mother's daughter, the one who killed her own mother? You are so much more than that, Darius replied, stepping closer. You are strong, compassionate, and you understand the stakes. If anyone can change their minds, it's you. He could see the determination rising within her, the fire that had drawn him to her in the first place. Okay, she said finally, her voice firm. I'll do it. I'll reach out. We'll show them that Theoria can be a true ally. Darius nodded, relief washing over him. But as they strategized, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mara's death had not only left a power vacuum in Theoria but had also ignited a firestorm of tension across the galaxy. Days turned into weeks as Elena sent out invitations, drafting messages of hope and cooperation. But as the responses began to trickle in, Darius sensed the undercurrents of animosity. Many still viewed Theoria with suspicion, unwilling to forgive or forget the sins of the past. The news of Mara's death had splintered the already fragile relations between Earth and Theoria, and as the date for the summit approached, Darius felt a growing unease. They stood together in the great hall of the palace, preparing for the Earth representative's arrival. The ornate decor, once a source of pride, felt heavy with expectations. What if they refused to meet? Elena asked, her fingers fidgeting with a silver bracelet. What if they come here only to condemn me? Darius took her hands in his, grounding her. You have to trust in your vision and your ability to lead. You can't control their reactions, but you can control how you present yourself and your plans for a better future. She nodded, but he could see the fear lurking behind her eyes. As the day of the summit dawned, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates from Earth arrived in sleek ships, landing gracefully on Theoria's surface. Darius felt a mix of apprehension and excitement as he greeted them alongside Elena. The Earth leaders stepped off their ships, their expressions unreadable. Among them, he spotted General Cortez, a stoic figure known for his military strategies and unwavering loyalty to Earth. Elena stepped forward, extending her hand. Welcome to Theoria. I'm grateful you could join us today. The general took her hand, but his grip was firm and unyielding, a clear indication of the skepticism that lay beneath the surface. Queen Elena, I hope your intentions are sincere. We come with caution. Elena's smile faltered but remained intact. I understand. I know the weight of my mother's actions still lingers heavily. But I promise you, I wish to build a different future, one rooted in cooperation and peace. As they began to discuss their visions for the future, Darius remained by Elena's side, feeling the tension ripple through the room. The discussions soon turned heated, with voices rising as doubts and accusations filled the air. Darius glanced at Elena, who stood tall despite the mounting pressure. We have an opportunity here, she said, her voice steady. An opportunity to unite, to learn from our past mistakes, but how can we trust a queen who has blood on her hands? One of the Earth representatives shot back, disdain evident in their tone. The word stung, and Darius could see the flicker of pain in Elena's eyes. We've all lost in this conflict, she replied, her voice unwavering. But if we allow our hatred to dictate our future, we'll never rise above it. Silence fell over the room, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Finally, General Cortez stepped forward, voice low but firm. You speak of unity, yet your mother's reign was built on fear. How can we be sure you won't follow in her footsteps? Elena took a deep breath, her expression resolute. You can't. But what I can offer you is a promise. A promise to work together, to learn from one another, and to create a new legacy. One that values life, not destruction. Darius felt a surge of pride as he watched her stand her ground, every word she spoke resonating with sincerity and hope. Slowly, murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the delegates. But just as it seemed like they were making progress, a commotion erupted outside the hall. Panic gripped the room as guards rushed in, their faces pale with fear. Your Majesties, one of them shouted, Theoria is under attack. The news sent shockwaves through the assembly. Darius exchanged a glance with Elena, and he could see the determination igniting in her eyes once more. "Gather your forces," she commanded, voice unwavering. "We will defend our home, together." The delegates nodded, a newfound resolve building within them. As they rushed to prepare for battle, Darius felt a mix of fear and adrenaline surge through him. This was it, their true test of unity would come not from words, but from action. Together, he and Elena rallied the troops, forging alliances amidst the chaos. They would face whatever threats came their way as one, united by a shared purpose. And as they prepared to confront the unknown, Darius knew deep down that their journey had only just begun. With the attack on Theoria serving as both a challenge and a catalyst, Darius and Elena stepped onto the battlefield, ready to defend their world and the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The galaxy will burn. Elena took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. "Then we will stop them." Darius nodded, his heart racing with the realization that their battle was far from over. They had triumphed over Queen MTH, but now a new, far more dangerous enemy had emerged, and this time the stakes were not only the future of Earth and Theoria, the entire galaxy was in jeopardy. "Let's go," Darius said, his voice filled with determination. "We don't have much time." Elena took his hand, her grip strong and steady. "We'll face this together." With that, they dashed toward the heart of the palace, prepared to confront the next battle that awaited them, one that would determine the fate of not only their worlds but the galaxy itself. The heavy footfalls of armored guards echoed through the palace corridors as Darius and Elena raced toward the control room, their hearts pounding with urgency. The imposing Xanthus warship loomed over Theoria's capital, its engines rumbling ominously, heralding destruction. "We can't waste any time. We have less than 10 minutes, Elena said, her breath coming in quick gasps as they reached the final door. "If we don't stop them now, Theoria will be reduced to rubble, and the galaxy will follow." Darius nodded grimly, his mind racing with every possible outcome. "What about the scythe? It's deactivated, but we need to ensure they can't access it and reactivate it." Elena pushed open the door to the control room, revealing a sleek console surrounded by holographic displays. The security systems were still intact but had been dormant since the night of Queen Mara's death. "I'm going to re-engage the fail-safe," she said, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Once it's active, no one will be able to access the scythe, not even me." Darius watched her work, his pulse quickening with every passing second. The Xanthus wouldn't wait forever, he could feel the tension in the air, a storm brewing just above them. If Elena couldn't finish the lockdown in time, all of this, their struggle, their sacrifice, would be for nothing. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the palace once more, shaking the walls with its intensity. 5 minutes. General Ver's voice thundered. "Deliver the weapon or face annihilation." Elena's hands trembled as she entered the final code. Her face pale under the weight of their actions. "Almost there," she whispered. "Just a few more seconds." Darius turned to the window, his gaze fixed on the massive warship hovering over the city like a dark omen. This wasn't just about saving Theoria anymore. If the Xanthus gained control of the scythe, they would use it to dominate the galaxy, obliterating entire worlds in their pursuit of power. Earth, Theoria, and countless other civilizations would fall beneath their rule. A loud beep sliced through the tension, and Elena exhaled sharply. "It's done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The scythe is locked down. No one can access it now." Darius felt a wave of relief wash over him. But it was short-lived. The warship above them wouldn't simply leave because the weapon was out of reach. The Xanthus were ruthless and would destroy everything if they didn't get what they wanted. "We need to confront them," Darius said firmly. "We can't hide in here and hope they'll just give up." Elena nodded, her eyes hardening with determination. "You're right. Let's end this." They hurried back through the palace, the tension building with each step. Outside, the sky was darkening as the Xanthus warship descended over the palace, its weapon systems priming for an attack. The people of Theoria watched in fear as their future hung by a thread. As they reached the palace courtyard, They were met by a detachment of the Orient guards, their faces set in grim determination. At their head was Commander Zero, one of Elena's most trusted allies. "Your Majesty," Zero said, bowing slightly. "The Xanthus have given us their final warning. We are ready to defend the palace, but their firepower far exceeds ours." Elena glanced at Darius, her expression unreadable. "Then we'll make them an offer they can't refuse." Before Darius could ask what she meant, Elena stepped forward, raising her voice so it echoed across the courtyard. "General Ver," she called, her voice carrying the strength of a queen. "I am Queen Elena of Theoria. I wish to speak with you directly, for a moment." There was silence. Then, with a loud hiss, a ramp extended from the underside of the warship, slowly descending toward the ground. A figure appeared at the top, General Ver, a massive alien clad in dark, intricately designed armor, his face obscured by a visor that glowed with a faint menacing light. He strode down the ramp, flanked by two soldiers carrying weapons that seemed far too advanced for the Thorian guards. Ver's voice boomed once more as he approached. "So the little queen finally shows herself," he sneered. "Have you come to beg for mercy?" Elena lifted her chin defiantly. "No, I've come to propose a deal." Ver halted a few feet away, his posture radiating arrogance. "A deal? You have nothing to offer, little queen. The scythe is mine by right, your mother promised it to us." Elena's eyes flashed with anger, but she maintained her composure. "The scythe is locked down. You'll never be able to activate it, no matter what you do. But I can offer you something more valuable." Ver's visor tilted slightly, as if he were assessing her. "And what might that be?" Elena took a deep breath, her voice steady. "An alliance. You may be able to destroy Theoria, but you'll lose valuable resources in the process. You know Earth won't stand by and let you take control of this system. However, if you leave now, we can offer you trade agreements, technology, and the strategic alliance of two powerful worlds. Together, we could rule the galaxy without firing a single shot." Darius held his breath. It was a bold move that could either save them or doom them all. For a long, tense moment, Ver remained silent. The weight of his decision hung heavily over the entire courtyard. Finally, Ver let out a low, rumbling laugh. "You are bold, little queen. Bold and clever, just like your mother." He took a step closer, towering over Elena. "But how do I know you won't betray me as she did?" Elena met his gaze fearlessly. "Because I am not my mother. And if you leave here with nothing, you will have made enemies of both Theoria and Earth. That is a fight you do not want." Ver studied her for a moment longer, then slowly nodded. "Very well. I will consider your offer." He turned and began walking back toward his ship, his soldiers following closely behind. Just before he boarded, he paused and glanced over his shoulder. "But be warned, Queen Elena, if you betray me, I will return, and next time there will be no offers, only fire." With that, the ramp retracted, and the warship's engines roared to life. Slowly, the massive vessel ascended into the sky, disappearing into the clouds as it left Theoria's atmosphere. Darius let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his body sagging with relief. "That was incredible," he said. Elena smiled faintly, though the tension in her shoulders hadn't fully dissipated. "It's not over yet. We bought ourselves some time, but we need to secure that alliance quickly. Ver won't wait forever." Darius nodded, his admiration for her growing by the second. She had confronted one of the galaxy's most dangerous warlords and emerged victorious, all without a single shot being fired. She truly was a queen deserving of Theoria's throne. As the sky cleared and the city of Theoria began to return to life, Elena turned to Darius, her expression softening. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. Darius smiled, his hand reaching out to take hers. "We did it together." For a moment, they stood in the quiet courtyard, the weight of their victory settling over them. The threat of war had been averted for now, and a new future lay ahead, one filled with hope but also uncertainty. but they would face it together, and whatever came next, Darius knew that he and Elena, now Queen Elena of Theoria, would fight for peace, for their people, and for the future they had both sacrificed so much to protect.